Welcome into PEC Match Point, your premier destination for news around the Power Esports Conference. We've only got 2 weeks left of the season, and we love that you're hanging out with us before Week 8 of the PEC begins. We've got a stacked show, highlights, reactions from some of the biggest games around the league, teams locking up their playoff spots. It's going to be a lot of fun, so make sure you stay tuned for the PEC Match Point, which brings you the premier action from the premier FBS Esports Conference in the country. Of course, big shout out to Idaho Air National Guard for making it all happen as well. And we take a look at what we got on the show today here. We got some massive matchups that we got to look back from last week and look ahead to week number 8. Again, we go around the league. We're going to get highlights from week 7. Boise State and Ohio State clashing in an epic battle across several different titles. Give you all the details on that. We'll go inside the PEC. Teams are starting to lock up those playoff spots. The number 1 seed in 3 of our 4 titles officially wrapped up here today. We'll tell you by who and what to look forward to for the rest of the PEC. But, of course, we start in Rocket League, and we had a banger. Yes, Baylor already had the number 1 seed locked up, but it did not matter. Syracuse was not going to back down. The Orange and Bears had an epic series. Syracuse, by the way, they won Game 1. 3-0 win for the Orange to kind of set the table. Syracuse quickly battled back, even it at 1 apiece. Game 3 goes into overtime, where Syracuse, for the first time all season in the PEC, has Baylor on match point when the Bears aren't able to win it themselves. Unfortunately for the Orange, Baylor even the series to send us to a Game 5. Late in Game 5, we were still tied. Syracuse could have maybe pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the season, but the Bears locked it in the end.
Into the air, but Lesser clears it out. Kababy and Hoxer meet in midfield, and Tiz is the third one back for Syracuse. Kababy trying to clear it out past that offensive zone, but gets demolished. 2 full tanks of boost for Syracuse on defense. Gonna have to make the most of them. Andy flicks it past one, but Tiz gets it out. Kababy back, needs to defend, and gets the save on Zanil. It's Hoxer up off the top, tries to get the dunk, and it's a great save for Syracuse. Andy, though, nobody back, and Syracuse goes down 1 with just 20.
Baylor would add an insurance goal as well. They take that 5-3 and win the series. Boise State, they've locked up the 2 seed, and they made sure that their final game of the season, remember, they're off this week and next week, was lights out defensively. The Broncos did not allow a single Ohio State goal in this series. Absolutely phenomenal defensive performance by the Broncos. They're in tip-top shape heading into Vegas. Again, another team effort like we've seen all season long for Boise State. All 3 members scoring at least 3 goals as well. This was kind of a crazy series. Michigan State and Nebraska, the Cornhuskers, we've seen some people saying maybe they'd upset a top 4 team, and they nearly pulled it off against Michigan State. This game, after Michigan State took a pretty quick 2-0 lead, the Cornhuskers battled back, an overtime win, another one as well, on the verge of reverse sweeping the runners-up from last year in the PEC. Unfortunately, though, for the Cornhuskers, Michigan State came alive when it mattered most. A shutout victory in Game 5 to slam the door and claim the series. And then wrapping things up, we had Kansas and Minnesota. This one was a fun little series as well. These teams also went to Game 5. Crazy that we had 3 Game 5 series in Rocket League this week. And very quickly in overtime, Minnesota made sure they were not going to back down. This Gophers team is red hot. They put the ball in the back of the net just 20 seconds into overtime. They take the series as well. A crazy week in Rocket League. Let's take a look at our results. Again, a lot of 3-2 scorelines. Not something you see every day in PEC Rocket League. Of course, Boise State with that lone shutout. But look at Syracuse, man. Nearly took down Baylor. As we take a look at the standings, unfortunately for that Orange, the loss is going to make them really in an awkward spot to try and run down Michigan State. Baylor, they're already locked in. They've got a date with history next week. We'll tell you more about it later on in the show. Can they go 16-0? Boise State is fully done with their season. They're locked in at the 2 seed, and then it's all chaos. You can see Michigan State and Syracuse, only a game separating them. Ohio State and Kansas, tied for 5th place. Minnesota's just got a small lead on Nebraska. I think the last few weeks of PEC Rocket League are going to be an absolute blast to watch. There's a lot of movement going on, and we've got some big games coming up as well. But moving on into Overwatch, the top 2 teams battled it out. Boise State and Ohio State. We took an in-depth look at the standings last week, just how close these teams were. And if Boise State wanted the number 1 seed, they needed to make quick work of Ohio State, and that's exactly what the Broncos did early on, jumping out to a quick 2-0 lead in the series. Again, Boise State at one point was the only team that had beaten Ohio State. Now the Buckeyes Overwatch team, they've lost a couple recently and going on to push. Boise State hope to make it 2 in a row as they try to finish off the Buckeyes.
Up in the back, and Mafia going down really early. Young's only kill with the overclock is that 4 turret.
Here comes Strider now. Can play off of Clear really well, and you can see how that works out. Rhett gets chopped by Clear. Clear now playing around these spawns, chasing onto Mafia. Mafia will go down, as well as King Donut. No front line, no DPS, no chance to beat the Broncos. A 3-0.
Massive win for Boise State. Syracuse, they took on Baylor. It was a fun little series, but the Orange, they got back on track. Remember, this is a Syracuse squad that a few weeks ago felt like they were fighting for the #1 seed. They've now fallen down a little bit, but they made quick work of the Bears. A 3-0 win, exactly when Syracuse needed this Orange squad. Looking really good for Baylor. They had a couple of close fights, but unfortunately just weren't able to consistently win the team fights to keep this series going on any longer. And then wrapping up PEC Overwatch, we had Minnesota taking on Kansas. And Kansas, again, another squad who, back in the fall, they were maybe one of the hottest teams in the league. They've fallen down a little bit, but what's the perfect time to get hot? Right before the playoffs, and that's exactly what the Jayhawks did. They took down Minnesota with a 3-0 sweep of their own, exactly when the Jayhawks need that win. We take a look at our results. Unlike Rocket League, sweeps across the board. Boise State 3-0, Syracuse 3-0, and then Kansas 3-0 as well. Utah, maybe one of the hottest teams in PEC Rocket League. They're on a bye. We said the standings at the top, though, it's so close. Boise State there at 11-3. Utah right behind them at 10-3. Unfortunately, the Utes aren't going to be able to jump Boise State, so best they can do is second place. And then you've got Ohio State, even with that loss, maybe can slither into the 1 seed. We'll tell you more about it when we look ahead to next week. And then you've got Syracuse and Kansas. All of a sudden, that's maybe a battle for the top 4 position. So I think PEC Overwatch, it's not done yet. And all of a sudden, we've got 5 teams who can easily compete for a title. Moving on to Valorant, though, Boise State and Ohio State at one point looked like the runaway favorites. And now it might be Boise State's to lose. The Broncos came in 14-1. Their lone loss, a crazy series in the fall to Ohio State, and Boise State looked to avenge it, and they got out to an early start. Back and forth in game 1, but Boise State ends up taking it 13-7, and now the Buckeyes trying to avoid a sweep. Again, this Ohio State team that's only 3-3 in the spring, and Boise State finished off the job in game 2.
Would you ever expect this play? You would never. And the dimensional drift.
Baiting with the off
The dimensional drift, they're not gonna know. Skies gets 2, 3. He gets everything. 4 for Skies. He wants the win, and he wants it now. Skelesis, a potential last kill onto Waldy. He's gonna get spotted by the drone. Hold on.
Oh,
he able to get one, but Skies is hot on the trail. The ace on the board. Skies wants the kill. Oh, but he's not gonna get it. It's not to be. Takes him down to 1 health as the rest of the team is on it. Hold on, but it's the closer to do it instead.
That win, by the way, going to lock up the 1 seed for Boise State. Absolutely incredible. Michigan State and Nebraska squared off, and the defending champs in the PEC, they got out to a hot start. Michigan State won the first game, dominant fashion, 13-2, but then Nebraska, they stormed back in a hurry. Game 2 came nearly down to the wire, 12-10 at one point before Michigan State focused back up, sealed the deal, but a great showing by Nebraska, proving that they can maybe make the defending champs work for it. But at the end, the Spartans get the 2-0 sweep. Of course, that wasn't all. We also had Baylor and Syracuse. This Orange team, by the way, don't let the record fool you. They may be one of the top 4 or 5 teams in PEC Valorant, and they proved that against the Baylor squad, who we've seen put up kills in bunches, but Syracuse left nothing to doubt here. They pick up a nice 2-0 sweep over Baylor, and that's exactly what we'd expect from the Spartans, or from the Orange, excuse me. And then wrapping things up, we had Kansas taking on Minnesota here. These two teams had a ton of fun. This one actually went 3 games total. Minnesota, they picked up game number 1, 13-5, and then Kansas stormed back. They won game 2, 13-9. Very close series there. And then the Jayhawks, they made sure they closed things out, a 13-5 win in game 3. So a crazy series there for Kansas, picking up the 2-1 win. We take a look at how PEC Valorant went this week. Again, Kansas and Minnesota, a close battle, and then the teams that you maybe would expect, Michigan State, Boise State, picking up sweeps. Ohio State, all of a sudden, they've fallen way down from the heights that they were at as we take a look at the standings. Remember, the Buckeyes that came into this spring season undefeated, now all of a sudden, like I said, they're only 3-3 in the spring. Maybe have a chance to fall below Michigan State if things get too crazy, fall below Utah. Boise State, by the way, 15-1. Their season is done. They have locked up that spot. Good job for the Broncos, looking incredibly dominant. Moving on and wrapping things up for PEC Week 7 with Smash. We had an absolute banger of a series between Kansas and Minnesota. Minnesota, they might be second place in the league, but man, they have a flair for the dramatic. These two teams battled it out going into game 4 both times, with the teams absolutely evenly matched. Doug Todd for Minnesota coming up with a couple of clutch wins in those final tiebreaker sets to give Minnesota that 2-0 sweep. But look out for Kansas. They made this Minnesota squad work for it. Michigan State and Nebraska, these two teams met up. This was number 1 versus number 2. We thought this was going to be a close series, and Michigan State did not even blink. A 16-6 win in game number 1 as the Spartans run through Nebraska. The Cornhuskers did win a set, but it was their only one of 8 matches they won all night in game 2, and it didn't really matter. A 14-6 win for Michigan State in game 2. So the Spartans, they joined Baylor 13-0, and oh, by the way, a perfect match record as well. Of course, they weren't the only ones. We had some more action here. We had Syracuse and Baylor. The Orange, again, another one of those teams that a few weeks ago we felt like we were talking to maybe they win a couple games. They're challenging for the 1 seed. And this Baylor squad gave them all they could handle and more. Syracuse does pick up the win 2-0. But both sets going into that match for Syracuse down 8-7 in match 4 of the second series before they were able to clutch it up, pick up the win. So Syracuse maybe faltering at the wrong time, but they still get the win. At the end of the day, that is all that matters. So big job for them. And then wrapping things up, we had Boise State taking on Ohio State, and this was a masterclass of a series. 3 games. Match 4 determining every single one. And for Ohio State, going into that third match, they were trailing 9-8. But C-Dude able to pick up the win. He 4-1 Smada. And that is all it took for Ohio State to pick up a win. The Buckeyes potentially peaking at the right time. We'll have to see. This squad, remember, got hot in the playoffs last year in the PEC. We take a look at our results for Smash again. Ohio State and Boise State, an epic clash, and then sweeps kind of across the board from who you would expect it to be, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Syracuse. Take a look at the standings. With that win, Michigan State, by the way, has fully locked up that top spot. Then you've got Nebraska, Minnesota right there at 2 and 3. Potentially the Gophers maybe can jump Nebraska. Syracuse, even though they've looked shaky at times, they're still winning. They pretty much locked up that 4th spot. And then Kansas, Boise State, Ohio State. Who knows what could happen down there at the end? The Buckeyes peaking at the right time potentially. We've got more to cover here on PEC Match Point, though. Again, playoff spots, they've been locked up, and there's more on the line in Week 8. We'll look ahead. We'll tell you the matchups you need to know, what games to look forward to. It's all coming up on PEC Match Point.
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master Sergeant Raxter. This is my life in the Air National Guard.
Scott Matlock, underrated recruit, has built himself into one of the best defensive players in the Mountain West.
What would you do if you couldn't fail? Would you see every setback as a catalyst to keep going? This is the innovator's mindset, because innovation demands daring. Is finding thousands of ways that don't work, and the one that changes everything. It's when your unrelenting spirit sees the world's needs and says, I will create something better. So, what will you do? Will you let your genius run wild? Give yourself the space to be great. Set your sights on something even bigger, because we know changing the world doesn't happen by chance. It comes out of the blue.
How's it look so far?
Great.
Comfortable?
Yes.
Times and places all in who you share them with. Joy,
I got in.
who you share it with.
This is a great use of your own equity.
Who you share it with.
Since you guys have been in here, some things have changed.
We've updated this place to be in its final form. New cabinets, new counters, all sorts of new stuff in here. This has turned into a place that wouldn't look out of place at an SEC or Big Ten football facility, and Dairy West has allowed us to have it here. We've taken a holistic approach to our player nutrition, and we're really thankful that Dairy West has made sure that our fueling station is the best in college esports and really at industry standard for any college athletic department.
Please, about to start the show, better take your seats.
Now earn up to 4 times the rewards with the ICCU Premier Rewards Visa credit card. It's the credit card from the credit union you love.
This is our new home.
Mission control, engine lock.
I'll call you after. I'll be right next to you.
Now earn up to 4 times the rewards with the ICCU Premier Rewards Visa credit card. It's the credit card from the credit union you love.
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master.
Boy, and again, we've only got 2 weeks left in the regular season of the PEC, but trust me, they're going to be good. And if you want to stay up to date with everything about the PEC, make sure you head over to the official Power Esports website. Get everything you know. We've got stats, in-depth player analysis, everything you need for the PEC to stay informed and stay connected. Go to pec.leagueos.gg for more. Again, some teams have their playoff spots locked up. Some teams are working on it. We take a look at what's coming up for Rocket League. Again, Baylor, they're 3 games away with a date with perfection. Can they take down Ohio State is going to be the question. Syracuse nearly pulled off the upset. Were the Bears maybe looking ahead to the playoffs? Were the Orange enough of a wake-up call? We'll have to see. 3 more games, and Baylor could finish the year at perfect 16-0. Ohio State, by the way, they need this one. They're tied with Kansas, as we saw, at 5-9. Of course, the Jayhawks have a date with Syracuse, but if the Buckeyes pull off this major upset, they would lock in that 5th seed in the PEC. So this will be a fun one, and I expect maybe 4 or 5 games outside the norm for what we've seen for Baylor earlier on in the year. Michigan State, they'll take on Minnesota in a Big Ten clash, and this will be a fun one. Minnesota's Rocket League, by the way, they're 3-3 in the spring, which might not sound like a lot. They didn't win a game in the fall. That's how much this team has turned the corner in the spring. They're getting hot at the right time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, we saw Michigan State struggle with Nebraska a little bit. The Spartans, they're trying to hold off the Orange. If they win, they do lock in that 3rd seed. So this one will be a ton of fun, a good test to see just how far Minnesota has come in the spring. Speaking, we were talking about Kansas. They take on Syracuse, the Orange. They need Michigan State to trip up if they kind of want to jump into that top 3 conversation where they've been on the fringe. By the way, Game 5s against Boise State in the fall and the spring, and a Game 5 against Baylor in the spring, you have to wonder what could have been for Syracuse. Kansas, meanwhile, if they pick up a win, maybe they vault past Ohio State. And then Nebraska and Utah, they're battling it out for 8th place. Again, Nebraska, they've showed promise. They took Michigan State to 5 games. I think this is going to be a fun little series. And then, as we said, Boise State, their season is over. They're off this week. They're off next week. 13-3, the 2 seed locked up for the Broncos. Moving on into Overwatch. This game at times felt like maybe we had 2 or 3 dominant teams. Now all of a sudden, we've got 5 squads who can maybe be title contenders. It starts with Ohio State taking on Baylor. Yes, the Buckeyes have lost 2 in a row, but you look down the standings, you look at some of those numbers we showed you guys last week. Ohio State, if they can lose no more than 1 map in their next 2 games, they would actually jump the Broncos and end up being our #1 seed, assuming they can win both those series. So a lot of pressure on Ohio State. They win with sweeps. All of a sudden, this bad taste in their mouth, it goes away, and they're the #1 seed. Baylor, maybe looking to peak at the right time. Again, this team has shown some sparks, some flashes in recent weeks against some of the better teams in the PEC. They just need that one series to put it all together, and maybe against a stumbling Ohio State team is the perfect time to rise up. Syracuse and Kansas, this one's got implications. 8-4 versus 7-5. Both these teams at times have been leading the PEC. They've fallen off a bit since their hot starts in the fall, and now all of a sudden the winner of this has that inside track to being the 4 seed and over the number 5 seed. So I think this will be a lot of fun. Remember, Kansas, they were 4-0 at one point in the fall, and then they fell off. Syracuse, they've been kind of battling with Ohio State. Boise State weren't quite able to get the job done in the spring like they would have hoped. So this is going to be a fun little series. And then Utah, again, this might be the hottest team in PEC Overwatch. They had the week off last week. They'll take on Nebraska. They're just trying to pick up wins. Again, unfortunately for the Utes, as we talked about, they're kind of at the mercy of everybody else. They're rooting for Ohio State to lose to maybe get that 2 seed, but they want to make sure they take care of business. And then Boise State, they're watching as well. Again, if Ohio State picks up some sweeps, maybe they're the number 1 seed. Moving on into Valorant, of course, the number 1 seed, as we talked about earlier in the show, it is locked up. Boise State at 15-1, done with the season and on the bye, but there's still a lot of wiggle room behind them. Ohio State, losers of 2 straight, which we never thought we'd see earlier in the season. They'll take on a Baylor team that, again, this team can sneak up on you. They've got, I believe, 2 players in the top 7 for kills in PEC Valorant. They're putting up numbers like nobody's business if you give them the opportunity. So Ohio State has got to be careful. Yes, they're in second place for now, but they cannot afford a misstep against Baylor. Syracuse and Kansas, much like we were just talking about with Overwatch, these 2 teams are neck and neck. This time it's Kansas who has the slight lead over Syracuse, but again, this Orange squad, they are, I think, so much better than their record. They took Ohio State to 3 games. They've taken Boise State to 3 games. Look out for Syracuse. If they get on a run late in the season, they start building momentum with maybe a win this week and a win next week, they're going to be very, very scary. Michigan State, speaking of scary, they're the defending champs. We've got to respect them. They're taking on a Minnesota squad who's taken some teams to 3 games. We saw them do that to Kansas this week, and we'll see what the Spartans can do. Again, the Spartans, they're right behind behind Ohio State. I think it's like a 1-game difference between those 2 squads. So Ohio State trips up. Michigan State can easily sneak right in there, and then Utah, quietly lurking. They have those 4 losses. They're going to need somebody ahead of them to trip up. They'll take on Nebraska. And I think this Ute squad, them and Syracuse are kind of my dark horse picks right now because I think those 2 squads have been a lot better than maybe people have given them credit for. And we'll see what they can do against the Nebraska squad who, again, nearly took Michigan State into overtime in Game 2. You cannot overlook the Cornhuskers. Wrapping things up with Smash, we get our big matchup of the week. Of course, we start with Ohio State taking on Baylor. The Buckeyes, they had that big win over Boise State last week. All of a sudden now potentially have a chance to make a late season run. Again, we heard from their director last time in the PEC playoffs in Vegas, Ohio State kind of came out of nowhere and made a late season push in the playoffs. Maybe they're peaking a little bit earlier this time, but here's the big one. It's Michigan State taking on Minnesota. Yes, the Spartans have locked up the undefeated, or the number 1 seed. Now they're trying to lock up the undefeated season. Join potentially Baylor by the time this game is played as the 2nd team to go perfect in the PEC. We'll see what Minnesota can do. The Gophers, they've had the flair for the dramatic. Doesn't really matter if you're a top of the league team or a team in the middle or maybe on the lower half. It seems like you're playing a tiebreaker against Minnesota. So I think this one could go a lot of fun. Oh, yeah, by the way, Michigan State, they haven't dropped a match all year either. So they've got a double perfect record to defend. And I think this one will be a lot of fun. And we'll wrap up with Kansas and Syracuse. The Orange, maybe faltering a bit of late. Boise State pushed them to 3 games. Baylor had them on the ropes of potentially going to 3 games as well. We'll see what they can do against the Kansas squad that's kind of been that middle ground, right? They've got Boise State, by the way, right behind them to the Jayhawks, so they cannot afford to make a mistake at any single point. And Boise State, again, their season, they're done. Nebraska, they'll get the bye as well. But it should be an absolutely jam-packed week here. Week 8 of the PEC. We take a look at the matchups. We've got Utah taking on Nebraska. The Utes, and quite a few titles, are kind of lurking, and they're just looking to pick up some wins, kind of build some momentum. Baylor, of course, their Rocket League team. Can they finish a perfect 16-0 against Ohio State? That's going to be an absolute electric game to watch. Kansas and Syracuse, it might not be 1 versus 2, but it feels like it's 4 versus 5 in every single title, and I think it's going to be absolutely an important series. And then Michigan State and Minnesota, of course, Smash matters 100%. Can the Spartans finish their season undefeated? We will have to see. But Week 8 of the PEC is going to be an absolute ton of fun. We appreciate you guys sticking here on the journey with us. We've got only 2 more weeks left. It's crazy to say. So good luck to all the teams. We wish everybody luck, and we'll tell you guys what happened next week on PEC Match Point.